Mike versus the world in this edition. I will play the world. Obviously, Mike will play Mike. Should Lane Kiffin leave his current job at Ole Miss for Auburn, who apparently is looking for a head coach? Mike, I tell you, he should not do that. He should absolutely not go to Auburn.
He should. A good one.
Yeah, he really did. I'm not saying he should stay at Ole Miss, by the way, but he should not go to Auburn.
I can argue against this. No problem.
You're going to have to.
You go.
He should not go to Auburn at this point. I think he'll have other opportunities coming up. We've talked on previous Mike Farrell Sports Talk podcast, available now, by the way, about how potentially Kiffin could be an heir apparent to Nick Saban down the road. We don't know what's happening at Texas A&M. There's a boatload of money there potentially. There's a payday waiting for Lane Kiffin at that point. Maybe even an NFL team calls at some point in time and gets kind of crazy and says, hey, this guy's figured it out. He's a good offensive coach. You never really know at that point. I think there's better things on the horizon for Lane Kiffin. I also think his personality style is just not one that's going to mesh with the dumpster fire that is Auburn. I feel like he has no time for some of this nonsense. He's going to be on his boat, not wanting to go meet the, Joey Moneybags, guy that wants to talk to him about, 2nd and 10 play calling. I think he's going to have no patience for that. I think he has no time for that kind of stuff. He's going to want to be left alone. That's not what Auburn's going to be about. And I also don't know if he wants to battle head to head with Nick Saban in the state of Alabama, right? That's a fool's job in some respects, is to go battle head to head with Nick Saban. I think Kiffin's probably learned enough and knows enough about that machine that he wants to steer clear of that. So while he certainly probably could go to Auburn, Mike, and be successful, if I was his agent, if I was Jimmy Sexton, and by the way, I wish I was, because I'd have a boatload of money, I would tell him, you know what, sit tight, play this out, and you'll have better options. Or stay at Ole Miss. You're not doing so bad there anyway. So Lane Kiffin should not go to Auburn.
So that is the good one, and I think that's the smart one. But, I will argue it because there are some arguments to be made here. The biggest worry I would have is that my assumption is Lane Kiffin has so many skeletons in his closet that if Auburn, old money wanted to get rid of him, that it wouldn't be a difficult search. They had to sort of make up this Brian Harsin affair and all this other stuff. I think they would just probably hire a private detective, and within one day they'd have 10 things they could fire Lane Kiffin for. That just strikes me as his history probably reeks of potential scandal. And I'm not saying like anything illegal or anything. I'm just saying Lane Kiffin's Lane Kiffin. He does what he wants, and he's probably got some things.
I do know he had a really good time in Boca Raton.
So there. That is my concern. If they want to get rid of him, I think it would be easier to get rid of him. But the positives here are Lane Kiffin has balls the size of mountains. Okay, so he's going to walk in there with his wheelbarrow, and he's going to not give a crap what anybody says. And he's going to do Lane Kiffin, right? And I don't think he's going to argue, to your point. I think you're right. He will be on his boat when they're trying to tell him what he should have called on 2nd and 10. And he's not going to care. Now, if you don't care, you better win. And I think he can win there because recruiting, Lane Kiffin's a very, very good recruiter. We saw this at USC. At USC, he had sanctions like crazy. There were some classes he could take a maximum of 15 kids, and like 10 of them were 5-stars. He recruits like crazy. He did a great job at Tennessee recruiting. Alabama, obviously, great job recruiting. And now at Ole Miss, he's recruiting very well. And he's the master of the portal. I think that title's sort of been taken away. Well, not the master of the portal. You could make an argument for Mel Tucker and some others that have done a great job there. But he's very, very good. And the reason I sort of stopped myself is because Jackson Dart kind of sucks. So he was a portal kid. But he can lure people through the portal, Auburn. He's bordering Georgia. So recruiting is ripe. He's got Alabama. Now it's tough against Saban, to your point. And he's got Florida. Ole Miss is a much, much more difficult recruiting job. From a portal perspective as well, luring kids to Oxford, and from a recruiting geography standpoint. But I don't think he gives two craps whether he's going to compete against Nick Saban. I don't think he gives two craps if he's succeeding Nick Saban. I think this is a guy who wants a challenge, and if you can get him in a right frame of mind and throw him a boatload of money, because Auburn can pay him more than Ole Miss. That's just my belief. I think he would be a good fit in that respect, just because of his the guy just he doesn't care. He doesn't
But
care.
I think, and that's the point against why he shouldn't go there, right? Because here's the thing: yes, they can absolutely throw him a lot of money, and if he's looking for money, then this is a dead point. This is a dead argument. But think about his rehabilitation program. He goes to Alabama, right? He does a great job. He goes to FAU. FAU would have let him play games on the moon if he wanted to, right? They would have let him play games. You know, he wouldn't have to show up to games. The FAU just needed something, and they basically said, "Lane, do whatever you want, get us back to relevance." And he actually, by the way, did that, right? Ole Miss was in the same boat, right? They're coming off of Hugh Freeze, Matt Luke, where you need something. We need a jolt. Lane, come in here and do what you got to do, right? And that's what he's done, right? Welcome to the SIP is everywhere, right? The transfer portal king is everywhere. Sure, Auburn's going to go, hey, we're desperate. Come here, help us. But we do things our way around here. I just don't think Nick's that in this point of his career, Lane has any patience to work in that style. I think he understands that he can go work the way he wants to work elsewhere. I don't think he wants to confine himself. Again, FAU let him do whatever the heck he wanted. Ole Miss is pretty much like, do whatever you want, get us relevant again. Auburn's going to tell him that. They're going to go, hey, do whatever you want, but we also need you to do X, Y, Z over here. I think he's going to have no time for that, no patience for that. He can be selective about what he wants to do, where he wants to work. The only caveat is money. If they're gonna back up the Brinks truck, it's the only thing where I go, okay, well, maybe Lane says, yeah, you know what, a couple of phone calls from a booster, I can handle that for 75 mil guarantee. Yeah, maybe he does that, but again, I don't think he should leave for Auburn. I think he'll have other opportunities if he wants to get out of Ole Miss.
I think also, I mean, other than the money, I think the recruiting opportunities are very, very attractive to him. I think the savior of a fallen program is very attractive to him. And I think people saying you can't do it is attractive to him as well, just based on his personality. So I think those other factors come into play here. I don't think he's going to take the Auburn job if they offer it to him. I don't think he's going to. I just think it's a fool's errand, as you mentioned. And why take what I consider sideways move, which Auburn fans get really upset at. But you can make an argument that Ole Miss is in a better shape as a program than Auburn is right now, for sure. And the other jobs looming, Texas A&M might be interested, or maybe, LSU in a few years.
Even Texas in a few years, right?
Yeah, Texas in a few years. On and on. There's going to be Florida. I mean, he likes that job for sure. There's going to be other jobs out there. And I'm not saying Billy Napier is going to get fired. I'm not saying Sark's going to get fired. And I'm not even saying Jimbo is going to get fired, because they're still probably looking for money under couch cushions to try to get rid of the guy. But there are other opportunities out there, or Brian Kelly's going to get fired. But I think, patience is not Lane's strong point.
Fair.
And maybe all of these factors coming together, with the recruiting advantage and little slightly more attractive portal sell and money, and the challenge might be enough for him to take it. I'm with you. I don't think he will, nor should, but the arguments, I go back and forth on this stuff. When I do a Mind to Mike about stuff, I always do the argument on, oh, yes, Wisconsin should keep Jim Leonard and Wisconsin shouldn't keep. There's a lot here that is attractive for this job for Lane Kiffin. To me, it just comes down to Ole Miss is here, Auburn's here. It's a sideways move or even a down move, and Lane Kiffin usually doesn't downgrade unless he's forced to. If he's forced to downgrade, obviously – being fired in the NFL, but Tennessee to USC at the time looked like an upgrade. Yeah. And then he's fired on the tarmac to rehabilitate his career, but then he spirals back upwards. So I don't think he would take that simply for that reason. But all the other reasons of Lane Kiffin being a ballsy dude who's going to walk in there, they will fall in love with him too. I mean, Brian Horson's personality is not exactly fallen lovable.
Well, depends who you are, I guess. Well, I think that's the only, if I want to argue for you for a second, the only argument I would make,
too, right? His personality. So, I mean,
I guess it's a dreamboat. The only argument I would make for you on this one is that I do think that he would look at this and say, this is my chance to take down the king. This is my chance to go into Auburn and be instead of Alabama and out Saban, right? That's the ultimate dragon to slay if you're any coach. We know Lane's got a bit of a vendetta kind of style chip. I think he always says the right thing about Nick and everything, but that didn't end fantastic when he took the FAU job, right? That was he basically got kicked out, and Sark got play calling duties in the playoff, which is kind of unprecedented these days. Most coaches stay and see that thing through. I do think that's the only element that he's got the ego that says, I'm going to go into that state and I'm going to out Saban, and I'm going to be the one to take down the dragon. I'm going to be the one to climb the mountain. That's the only thing I could see Nick doing in a super, super ego-soaked moment, plus $75 million.
Yeah, and I think we both agree that it's just not worth it to do. But all of those are great points. You took the good one. I don't mind. I never mind. I always give you first choice. But I think it's a really intriguing argument, and that's why it's on Mike versus the World.